As we heard yesterday from Bill Gates, technologies of all kinds have enormous potential to drive economic growth. Tarek Elmasry is Managing Director of the Middle East Office of McKinsey Company, one of the summit's knowledge partners for 2012. And he's going to share the highlights of a recent report on the interplay between the internet and economic growth.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here today. In many ways, this is a bit like a homecoming for me. I've spent 20 years in technology, media, and tech, including growing up professionally in the Valley. And then only recently, in the last year, I've actually moved here to the Middle East to look after our operations here in the region. And so coming here with you today, both TMT and in the region, is a homecoming. I think it's also extra special to be here in the UAE, which is the world's second most wired country in homes passed and in homes connected. And so this is a very special place, and we'll see the linkage with that comment with what we'll talk about today. I'm going to share with you just quick snippets of some research we've done on the internet's impact, globally speaking, on creating growth and jobs. And I'll give the quick background on this. It was a few years ago. Dick Costolo and I were having, CEO of Twitter, a good friend. Dick and I were having this debate about what the role of the internet actually was, and whether the internet was creating jobs and moving us along and creating growth, or whether the deflationary power associated with the internet and the increase in productivity and those negative, positive from a societal benefit, but negative from an actual growth and job creation, was worse. And we had a nice spirited debate, and Dick is, if anybody knows, a very funny guy. And we concluded at the end of it that there were not a great set of facts. And so we, McKinsey, then launched off and did the kind of research you'd expect from us, on a lot of detailed look about what the value created is by the internet and whether it was actually net positive or whether it was a net negative. So certainly it's societally positive, and we get that, but because of productivity, because of price pressure, because of all these other things, was that actually slowing economic growth? Simple question. We wanted to understand that, and we also wanted to understand how it varied by country. And so, launched a pretty big piece of research. I'm just going to give you a few snippets on it. Find me afterwards if you want to chat more. What you see here is the percent of the gross domestic product that is associated and driven by the internet and would not have existed without the internet. The blue countries are the developed countries, the red ones are the aspiring and in the process of growing. A couple of things you should notice. First of all, the developed countries, certainly much higher. I think they average around 3.2. The aspiring countries average about 2%. And so somewhere between 2 and 3% of GDP is created and only exists because of the internet. Globally, that means a country the size of Spain. If the internet were an economy of its own, geographically bound, it'd be the size of Spain, bigger than Spain, and it would be growing faster than Brazil. Not a bad economy. So it gives you a little picture there. But the question you might ask then is, you might say, well, you can see, there we go. So the mature countries, 3.4, the aspiring countries, 2. The question you might ask next, you might say, well, the aspiring countries are lower. I get that, and that makes sense. Lower internet connectivity. They don't have fiber the way there is here in this country and lots of other places. But what's the growth? And so the growth, what you see here is basically internet users, connected internet users. We're north of 2 billion right now globally, going to go to 3 in the next 4 or 5 years. The aspiring countries growing at 6 times the rate of the developed countries. That makes sense. And this is, of course, driven a lot by mobile. So you think 60% of Africans right now are mobile connected. Now, the smartphone penetration is lower. But if anybody's got a BlackBerry here, I know the company's dying. It's no jokes about BlackBerry. But there are more lines of code in your BlackBerry, and there's more processing power in your BlackBerry than John Glenn's shuttle rocket that went up to the moon in 1969. And so a lot of this growth is driven by the whole mobile revolution that's happening. And so the aspiring countries, smaller percentage of GDP being driven by the internet, but certainly growing much faster. Help with the clicker. Is there a manual? Can we manually advance this? All right, good. One more. Perfect. By languages, where's the growth happening? Arabic, the largest, fastest growing language on the internet. Not surprising in some ways. Advance me, please. There it is. Now, the real thing that affects a lot of this, and you might ask the question, and we asked ourselves, says, how does this affect for job creation? One more. And this was the nub of what we were trying to figure out, which is, we know the internet increases productivity, and we know that productivity increases usually result in fewer jobs, more output for fewer jobs. In the developed world, for every job that was reduced, 1.6 jobs were created due to the internet. In the aspiring world, that number was double that. And so the net of it is, the internet is actually creating more jobs, and is creating more jobs in the developed and in the developing and the aspiring world than it is in the developed world. This gives us lots of hope and lots of excitement. It also creates responsibility, which I'll close with in a moment, about what we ought to do to accelerate it, because these numbers, while they're nice, we think there's a lot more upside here. So, one of the best ways to accelerate job creation and growth, and one of the things, knowing that government plays an important role, is what the government can do. So we look at the e-government index. We say everybody talks about South Korea, we'll sometimes talk about Singapore. And so if you look at the countries, kind of 30 countries, the developing ones in red, the developed ones in blue, it's actually quite striking. Not surprisingly, all the red is on the right-hand side, and so these are the developing countries. The Middle East, this number is misleading. This is the e-government index. It is very misleading because it is a mixture of hyper-developed, which I would say in the UAE, and those less developed. And so we can unpack the number and kind of show you the differences. But take, for example, the hyper-developed in Dubai next week. In a few days at GITEX, Dubai will announce the iPhone application for everything, to pay all of your utility bills, everything through a simple one-touch iPhone application. iOS based, and you'll get the BlackBerry and the Android ones following next. So I think it is misleading that we see the Middle East on the far right-hand side, because you kind of have to unpack it. But by and large, e-government is a very big way to drive the economic growth and job creation, and I think the aspiring world has a long way to go here. Now, we go next. What really creates this kind of the ease of entrepreneurial index? And we break this down into three pieces, which is the ease of starting a new business, the ease of financing it, and internet accessibility. And what you can see here, a very, very, very big spread. The reason we unpack this is because many of you in the audience influence policy and have businesses which will benefit from the changes in policy. But hopefully you walk away from here armed with the idea that the internet in our geography actually creates jobs in multiples of those reduced. And in this geography, it's 2 to 3x multiple. And then you walk away with the idea of the specific things we can do. And so the ease of starting a business is 60% of it. The ease of financing the business is a little more important than the internet accessibility. The good news is, as I mentioned, there's a lot of investment happening on the internet accessibility, and fiber being rolled out in Qatar, in the UAE, and beyond. Excuse me. But you get a sense that there's a lot of upside. You just look, you basically have a 4x multiple on the right-hand side of this chart from the lowest country to the highest. Put this all together. If you think, what have we talked about? And this is just a snippet of the research. The big point I would like you to walk away with is that the internet actually creates, on average, 3.1 jobs for every job reduced. And it is reducing jobs because we're improving productivity and there is increased price pressure, but it is creating 3 to every 1 reduced. In our developed world, it's even higher. The second big thing I'd like you to walk away with is there's a lot of specific things we can all do along levels of the individual, the entrepreneur, enterprises, and governments to drive this more, because in our parts of the world, there's even more upside. A small piece of it is rolling out more fiber and creating the internet accessibility, but the whole ecosystem actually needs to happen. And you all have a great opportunity to help shape that and help capitalize on it. So, thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing many of you at the breaks.